I got an error message, but we're seeing that that we're being live streamed, so I'm going to try to multitask here. This is Zoph. You are watching Simply SCAdian, no title required. I am without Lucas. No, we are live. I am without Lucas tonight. His son, who is a high school senior, has his final band concert, so his son is there. My son also just graduated from high school. So I am now an official empty nester. So my guest and I were talking earlier about how much free time I have, and now that I'm not a full-time mom anymore, maybe I can focus on some more SEA stuff. And I'm going to talk more with our guest about the things because he's got all the ideas and all the A&S stuff for us to talk about. So anyway, Simply SCAdian, no title required is a show focused on non-peers in the SCA. We were tired of seeing all these shows that kept coming out during the pandemic, which was Mr. This, Master That, Duke This, Duchess That. We were like, what about the regular folk in the SCA? They have just as much to share, just as much to teach us. So there, from those conversations, Simply SCAdian, no title required was born. And this is almost the end. We have one more show after this, and it'll be the end of our fourth season, believe it or not. So what can you do to help with Simply SCAdian, no title required? Quite simply, we need guests. We have a form on our Facebook page, which is pinned to the top, which is a recommendation form. So please recommend people to us. We're slowly working our way through that list, but we want people from more kingdoms than the Mid, the East, and Atlantia. So if you know somebody from another kingdom, we would love to talk to them about what they do in the SCA. And it would make Lucas incredibly happy if we got him someone from Lockak. He wants somebody from Lockak or Drachenwald, which we would be happy to tape so that everybody can get a decent night's sleep. Okay, speaking of a decent night's sleep, I'm hoping to get one tonight, so we better get going. Tonight's guest, Parzival Angist, first started playing in the SCA in August 2015 in the Barony of Rivenstar. After having to take a break in 2018 due to mundane life, in April 2023 he jumped back full swing in the Shire of Minid where he serves as Web Minister and Exchequer. He participates actively in fighting and marshalling rapier activities and is cadetted to Warder Liu Kuachi. Outside of the list, he is perpetually engaging in what some, including himself, would call a ridiculous number of arts and sciences. His primary focuses are leatherworking, coin making, bardic arts, primarily singing, ukulele, and performative magic, and courtiership. He also dabbles in gaming, kumihimo, sewing and costuming, embroidery, calligraphy and illumination, brewing, paper making, book binding, cookery, ink making, beading, wire weaving, research of ceremony and pageantry, and more. You can see some of his favorite projects and commissions on his website, which we'll share a link to, or on his FB page, which is under Admantus Artifacts. At events, you'll either find him on the rapier list, retaining for their majesties, chatting with folks about A&S, or hyper-focused on his latest project somewhere. All right. Well, welcome to the show. So, Parzival, how did you find the SCA?
It started in my freshman year of college, when I was starting in Rivenstar, which was, Lafayette, West Lafayette area. I went to college at Purdue, and at the Be Involved Fair, which is like during like the pre-week, 4 classes is kind of the student club recruitment, fair. And he's like, those guys are wearing medieval looking stuff. What's going on over there? Um, and had a conversation. I stayed at the booth for like probably 15, 20 minutes talking with I think it was Professor Peter was who I was talking with at the table, about just all, not even like the SCA specifically, because I didn't even, because it was with student organizations, technically the medieval society, the Purdue Medieval Society is like the student organization part of that, but it's officially part of Rivenstar. And no, I was pretty much enthralled, and then started checking out the weekly fighter practices. And so first activity I got into was rapier combat, and then from there, I started seeing, various arts and sciences that people did. It was at my first Maiden Festival of the Maidens 2016, that I saw there was a coin making demo being done by Master Philippe de Leon, I believe, which was kind of my first foray into just arts and sciences in general. It's like making things is pretty awesome. Uh, and yeah, uh, progressed and in some parts spiraled out of control from there.
Oh no. So what is it about rapier that drew you in?
um, so the initial thing that drew me in was that was like they were using real swords, not wooden ones. Was the what made me just want to check it out when I went to that first fighter practice. Um, but in keeping with rapier over heavy fighting, one, it is a much more dexterity over strength based activity, and I wanted to do one of these martial activities, and I've never been the most strong and or physically fit. And also, minus the cost of swords, of like the swords themselves, rapier was significantly easier for me to get into, finance wise as a college student. Because I didn't really have the means to build my own armor. So I would have had to, if I'd wanted to check out heavy, I was thought it was going to be, $500 starting for some of the stuff I would need. But like as I've continued with it, I like the both the history, and there's I don't know, I find personally more I guess the elegance of it. Like I said, it's much more dexterity based. It's much more like I've done some martial arts, and I am much more much more drawn to the movement aspects of it than of a lot of the power aspects of it. That's kind of where I continue, or what kept my interest in that, and then from there is just like, yeah, is what I like to do.
So did you join the fencing club in college as well?
No, my only fencing I've done has been in the SCA.
Have you ever, so tell me about swords. Okay, I've never had like a sword geek. So
Mm.
what is it about, what are the different kinds of swords in rapier?
In SCA rapier, there's not most of them in terms of like the actual specs of them have to follow pretty closely to the not pretty closely have to follow within what is laid out in the rules for it. So there's a specific length and like amount of flex it has to have to it. um I've seen most kinds of swords there, aside from like big like aside from like two-handed like claymores and whatnot. um like I mainly fence with just a rapier. But there are people I know, particularly in cut and thrust, um that there's more variation of you'll see like katanas and sabers, which is a slightly more like curved European sword. um or you'll get into like some long sword, or even like a German Zweihander. Uh, like yeah, most of that variation you'll find in cut and thrust, because in cut and thrust is where you start using percussive hits. So there's more function, I guess, to various sword shapes, and also like those swords were designed to, you know, be for slashing instead of stabbing.
Um, so here's an oddball question for you, but I know you well enough to think you can handle it.
All right.
In your opinion, what is the best fencing scene in a movie?
Fencing scene in a movie. Hmm. I mean, it's on when you ask most, I don't know if it's the most accurate, but when you ask most people, they'll say the fight between Wesley and Inigo in Princess Bride, and I'm inclined to agree. Uh, Even if there's some parts of it that are a bit, you know, for the choreography, not for the actual accuracy of it, but it's still it's so well done. It's very it uh is fun and like still feels like a real fight. Like a lot, there's some I used to be I used to want to like work in movies, be like a special effects artist or a prop maker. It's one of my main hobbies outside the SCAs. I make prop replicas. Um, and it's like anytime honestly when I'm watching a lot of movies, I will like be either like be watching effects or like watching choreography stuff like that. Just 'cause, like how well did they actually do this?
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, Princess Bride. I am
Mm,
totally with you. I think that is one. Although I'm a huge original Robin Hood with Errol Flynn. I'm a pretty big fan of that one scene on the stairs, which also now we have to bring up the court jester.
hmm
As Danny Kaye's switch from the fierce fighter to the petrified fighter, like that was legit. It was one of those moments for me in a movie where I was like, this human being is an incredible actor. Like it's sort of like Sigourney Weaver when the alien's on her face, right? Trying to get her on her face. Like I think Sigourney Weaver is just with a toy, but man, it's so believable. All right, anyway. Okay. So you are a cadet,
hmm
a warder. What does that mean?
It's, I mean, so it's not like a, you know, official regulated term, but like the general is if you are training under a bronze ring, which in for those not Middle Kingdom is a bronze ring is the grant level award for fencing. Uh, you are a cadet, and then uh, I always mix up the two. Either provost or protege is training under a master of defense. One of them is for a pelican, one of them is for a master of defense, and I can't
Provost.
remember.
Provost is for a mod.
It's for
Protege is
my
for a pelican. Yeah.
okay.
So is that your goal to eventually achieve mod?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Probably a ways off, but yeah,
You got time.
that's exactly.
Okay, but you say so you like, and I was trying to be funny when I kept reading through all of the sciences that you
Yeah.
do. It's like, how can you, so it's like jack of all trades but master of none. Have you
Yeah.
ever like hyper focused on one, mastered that, and then moved on, or do you just like to dabble?
I wouldn't say hyper focused and mastered and then moved on. But definite like the ADHD is very strong in finding a new task, finding a new thing, and getting, you know, very intense on probably like the like beyond the surface level of it, like, you know, getting like level basically like, you know, assuming let's say there's 5 levels to mastering a craft or something, I'll get myself to like level, I don't know, 2 or 3, and then I was like, ooh, a new interest thing. Um, and I keep, but I try to keep in practice for those that like kept me in interest, because they're one, so many projects I do use stuff from all kinds of different you know, different parts or different types of arts, um and also you know, just like the people I, you know, talk with, and, you know, in all the questions I have about this kind of stuff. If I hear, about people looking for, it was like talking, like they're getting into something that was like a passing interest of mine from point. It was like, all right, here's what I know, and there's like 3 people that definitely know more than I do. Uh,
All right, so let's look at these. Let's talk about them one at a time. Tell me
mm,
about leatherworking. What got you into leatherworking?
I honestly don't remember. Like we were talking about this, like I think, like it was. I think the very first bit of leatherworking I tried to do, I was in middle school and was trying to make myself like a Jedi belt. Um, out of
That's
I
so awesome.
out of a like leather briefcase I got at Goodwill, and like cut all the leather off. It did not turn out very well. Um, but that was like my very first uh attempt at something like that. And I started doing it more in earnest probably 2019, 2020. I think 2020. But yeah, because that was when I moved, or that was when I graduated college. Because um I got into most of my like artsy stuff in that regard, like after college, because there's no time. I had to stop the SCA because there was no time anymore. Um, I've been going to like some Ren fairs and whatnot, and there were places that sold like scrap bags of like cut-offs from like ends of leather that people that made like big stuff and whatnot. And I started with just making like simple tankard straps and like belt clips and stuff like that. And started moving on doing stuff, different stuff from there. As I handed off two of my recent and probably favorite projects this past weekend, actually. I've been messing around with doing embossing, which is like pressing a design into leather. And I'm trying to see if I have one around here. I've been actually modeling my own stamps. I realized it's fairly easy to turn line art into a 3D model. Um, and so I've been making like award medallions for the crown. Um, and I did one for our household, actually, basically the household of my warder symbol is a lotus flower, and I made lotus flower medallions for everybody.
Nice.
So
So
there was that, and there was also something I donated to the Order of the Bronze Ring, actually, because my cadet sister was surprised given her bronze ring a couple events ago. And on the drive back, we were talking about how there used to be more regalia for the order, including there used to be a baldric for wearing this like giant, I don't know how heavy it is. I want to say 10-pound ring that they put on you when you're made a bronze ring. There used to be a baldric to wear it on your hip, and it went missing some years ago. And I immediately just my head was like that won't do. So I made a new one for that. And I found out like midway through making it that this year is the 25th anniversary of that award being created. So good timing.
awesome. So a question about embossing that I've always wondered.
Hmm.
When you are embossing the leather, do you have to use like you put the thing on the leather, do you have to bang it down or is it pushing it enough to get the symbol in the leather?
Pushing it by hand is not. There's a couple different ways. So I got I have my some of my tools right over here actually. Um, so the ones that you buy, like from leather uh, suppliers, are metal, and they're pretty small surface area, and they're made to be hit. So that like you wet the leather um, to make it take an image better, and then you go in with a hammer, and just like not a full size hammer, or not a metal hammer, because that actually will deform this and will damage leather. So you use like a plastic mallet, um, and that'll imprint that. Uh, most of mine that I've done are 3D printed in resin, and that will shatter if you hit it with a hammer, um, that normal way. But depends upon the size. So these are some small ones I did for different one. I've got a set. They're the Elder Futhark alphabet.
Oh,
Um,
neat.
I've got a set of these that someone commissioned a bunch of these to use as like button embellishments on a cloak. Um, and so that I can do with the hammer. Bigger ones, like the things I do for medallions, uh, because there's got such a big area, unless you hit it perfectly on center, it won't press very well. So for that, I just take like a hand clamp, so for anything that is like over half an inch in diameter, I will clamp it down, and just leave it for like 2 or 3 minutes, and it'll give like the same depth of impression that you will hitting with a hammer. Um,
When you say you have to wet the leather, do you have to soak it or can you just spray it with water?
you sponge it.
Okay.
If you
Slightly
soak
saturated, but not dripping wet.
yeah, if you soak it, basically if there's so much water in it that it's not being absorbed quickly, uh it's not going to take, or the image is going to take too well, um or it might actually, like, you want the surface under it to be dry, because if it's wet it'll almost kind of like spring back. So
Got
either if you hit it too hard it'll damage the leather, but if you don't hit it hard enough, it won't even, like, the image will kind of just release as it dries. So
So what I'm just curious, like what's the cost of leather nowadays?
if you're buying like whole sides of it, very expensive. There's actually a place in Indy called Lanwerlens. That's like the guy makes like leather shoes, but sells all kinds of like leather and leather working stuff. And uh I'll tell you, cast off bins are great. So um, I buy whole rolls of leather that were like discards from like the Red Wing factory, um, and that's sold by the pound. And for a lot of belts I make, there are uh, it's an I don't know what part of the actual like hide it is, but it's basically it's a piece cut off the edge. So it's like long. It's basically it's a super long piece, but it's maybe a foot wide or so.
Hmm.
Um, and that's not too expensive. If you're doing big projects, like I made a quiver for my warder a couple months ago, and luckily he actually had leather on hand for that, because that was a good, like, probably 2 feet wide and a foot and a half long piece. Um, and even that, for something that thick, like, because I could get that from the cast off, like the by the pound stuff, but that stuff is more fit for like making pouches and whatnot. For something that's rigid, I would have had to buy like actual hide, and that probably would have been at least $100, or like for a piece that I could cut a piece that big out of, like just for that.
So I'm the reason I'm asking is you've made all these award medallions.
Hmm.
So, we talk about, I hear a lot about the scribal artists in the SCA,
Hmm.
how much money they spend on parchment and calligraphy pens
Hmm.
and paints. But it sounds to me like the work that you're doing as well is definitely a huge donation to the kingdom, because not only is it your time, but it's also your financial outlay to make these award
Hmm.
medallions.
Hmm.
How many did you just give to their majesties, or are you giving to their majesties?
At the Tournament of Defense, I had 30 for him.
Wow. Wow.
Because I saw, no, they've been posts still going up. They were short on groves and evergreens and purple frets and others, but like those were the three that I had to give. Um, yeah. Luckily for those, like the most of the cost in those comes out of finishing them, because those are only, they're about inch and a half or so across. So it's easier to find pieces to stamp, like to stamp for those that aren't going to break the bank. uh like they're now time wise depends on how fancy I want to make them, and I'm not one to underdo things. So I was like, because I was thinking, it's like, I could probably get away with just the embossed image. And I was like, no, I'm painting these. What am I saying?
Right, right. Well, that's
Yeah.
the you're awesome. You're awesome. All right, so let's go on to other arts that you do.
Yes.
Coin making.
Hmm.
So you told us that the first thing that you went to, you saw
Hmm.
people um do making coins, Master Philippe. What do you people do with the coins that they make? I guess that's what I've never understood.
Uh, the two main things is using them as like as just like favor tokens to just give out, or use them for gaming. Um, like for if you're doing like medieval dice games or card games or whatever, you can't be doing actual gambling, so you've got pouches of like coins and like beads and stuff like that. um but yeah, those are the two main things. uh a lot are given as largesse as well. My first ever largesse project I did was for Baron and Baroness of Rivenstar at the Christmas court that year. And it's funny because I actually had my coin box right near me because I was cutting out some brass blanks shortly before this. So I can actually show the first designs I did were these Rivenstar pennies.
Wow.
Um, and so like did a set of those that I presented. Ah, So, and the Moneyers Guild in Midrealm does a every reign makes a new royal pound and donates a like batch of those several times through their reign to their majesties, because coins are a popular, like they're a very easy favor largesse. They add a little more to the feel of the uh to the SCA.
Right. So what are they made out of? What are the most coins made out of?
Most are made out of aluminum, um, mainly because that's the cheapest blanks you can get. Once or twice a year, one of the coining guilds will do an enormous order of like thin aluminum washers, but with no hole drilled in them. So just a zero size inner hole, and you get these just tons of these tiny, just like this is uh a couple, probably like probably maybe $10 worth, and there's a couple hundred in there, so you can get a lot of coins out of that. Majority of your cost for when you're doing the aluminum stuff is in the dyes, and also making the dyes, because that's a pretty time consuming process.
What's the
um
process like to make a die? What is involved in that?
all right, here we go. So you start with a piece of this steel round stock. It's like 1 inch. This is 1 inch for like 3/4 inch coins, which is the most common size. Um, you go in with punches that you have to make. So these are punches. You make them out of some kind of high carbon steel. The two most common things is either you get like a set of cheap like nail setters, like nail punches, or use concrete nails. These are concrete nails, and you go in with a file, and it's I can try, but it's not really going to show up on camera. You carve a couple of generic, yeah, it's not going to show. There's a couple of generic shapes that pretty much all coins use. So like there's a circle. This is like a ring. Short and long, just like straight lines. triangles and curves. And almost any shape on a medieval coin can come out of those. And you go in with, so like you put this in a bolster or a vise, something that will hold it in place, and you go in with the punches and a hammer, and you go and just line it up exactly where you want it and strike it to carve out the design. Like, will not carve out, punch out the design. That's called a chased design because you're not actually removing material. Or you can actually engrave it, and that's, some people use electric ones, but I've got a hand engraver for that, and that's just going in. I'll use like some kind of small sharp like just scratching tool to like outline the design, and then you go in with the engraver very slowly and just like bring out little slivers at a time to remove the design from the die. Is
Wow.
actually, this one will probably show up. This is an engraved design I did recently because someone requested tokens for their vigil.
Wow.
There
Wow.
it is.
Right there. Wow.
So I've
What
got a
intricate detail that is. See, I could never do that. I'm a big picture person. I'm not a little focused. I can't focus on things like that, but that's incredible.
yeah, that one also is the die I've had to grind down and start over on the most times because the problem with either like punching or engraving is because like when you finish it, you got to polish it really well because any little scratches on it will show up on your final design. So if you get off by just a little bit and it's not something you can polish out, you either have to be content with that mark being there or start the whole thing over.
Gosh, no way, no way, no way, no way, no way.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so now my favorite thing,
Mm,
Bardic Arts.
yes. Let me put this back.
So what got you into the Bardic Arts?
Um, well, I'd been singing and let's see, the three main bardic things I do, singing, ukulele, and performative magic, I did before I was ever in the SCA. I've been doing performative magic since I was like 6 years old. The first job, like the first like, it's like what I want to be when I grew up is I wanted to be a magician from ages about 6 to 10 at least. Um, and then singing, I've been singing like I started in choir in middle school or intermediate school, so since fourth grade. Um, and was in school choir through all intermediate school and middle school, and I sang in the Cincinnati Boy Choir and men's choir for 3 years. Um, and also just grew up on way too many musicals.
So you told me before we went live, tell me about
mm.
your most popular song that you've written.
Oh boy. Yeah. I wasn't even sure if it was ready yet, but I got people asking if I could do it. So last year's at Bardic Madness, I mentioned that I had been working on a filk of the pirates who don't do anything from VeggieTales called The Artisan That Must Do Everything. And I was honestly not sure how it was going to go over, but it was a huge hit at Bardic Madness. Um, so it also, none of them I've performed yet, but inspired me. Was like, I guess I'm a VeggieTales filk guy now, so I have a couple other VeggieTales filks in the works.
That's great. Um, so I can't believe we're running out of time. So you dabble in gaming, kumihimo, sewing and costuming, embroidery,
Hmm.
C&I, brewing, paper making, bookbinding, cookery, ink making, beading, wire weaving, and more. So let's pick one. Let's talk about ink making.
So
Tell me
that's
about ink making.
that's one, like that's one that was definitely like it's a something I learned for a specific project. So it's not one of my like active ones. But no, just I have a friend with a walnut tree and decided I want to learn how to make walnut ink. Um, and have they're actually about ready right now, because I did a test run with, because you got to pick them and like let them fully dehydrate before you actually start or like boiling them down into ink. um and yeah, that was literally just a there's a it was like that's a it's like, there's a resource, I know something you can do with that, and just decided to give that a try. So I did a test run with a couple just to see, like, to get it working. And when we have time, like probably after the event this weekend, we're gonna try actually boiling the we got a cauldron, boiling a whole cauldron of them, and just what are we gonna do with that much ink? I don't know, but we're gonna do it. Worst case scenario, gonna make a bunch of scribes really happy.
Yeah, so I mean, I've never even thought of making ink. Like
Mm.
where did you start to research the ink making process?
Well, I knew that walnut ink was a thing, because I've known that was a thing since I was a kid, because we also had a walnut tree. And um I don't know if you've ever shelled a walnut off of a tree before, but they're full of iodine. um and I knew that iodine ink was a thing, and eventually learned about, let me grab something from one of these bins behind me. On a completely different project, there's a friend of mine who makes um spell book props, and I asked how he aged his paper, and he mentioned he used walnut ink. And I was looking into it, and I thought they meant walnut color ink. And it was like, no, it's actually made from walnuts. And so then like a month later, talked with my friend about it. It was like, we could probably do that. Uh, and yes, like, so many of these arts that I have on there were literally the result of, not necessarily out of pure spite, but out of pure force force of creativity. It's being like, do I need to learn how to do this? No, but the universe can't stop me.
Um, so what kind of brewing do you do?
Uh it's funny, you're picking the ones that I've honestly not done a ton of, but have done like a couple projects for. The two I've done that were successful, I say, I'd say, I make mead occasionally, and I've also like fermented ciders. Uh, the cider thing was came about 2 years ago, because I'd made mead previously, so I already had like the growler, or the growlers, like the big brewing stuff for that already. And I was about to leave town for like the month for Christmas, and realized, is like, I still got a jug of apple cider in my fridge. I don't want to pour it out, but this is gonna go bad by the time I get back. Wait, why don't I just make it go bad? And so I put it in I like set it up and like left it for the month when I was gone for Christmas. And it turned out pretty good, actually. Like, I preferred that to some of the meads that I've done for hard ciders. Um I'm gonna not this year, but next year, I'm doing my first Penzic, and I plan between now and then breaking all of that back out, and like making a batch of mead to bring along with me for Penzic.
Nice. Well, I'm sorry that we're going to miss you this year because I'm sure that they would love to hear the artisans who do it at a Bardic circle.
Well, yeah, you gotta wait, I guess. No, I
Right.
this year I was already committed to War of the Lilies. And I realized don't have the time to do two wars in a year. Um, and also most of the people that I wanted to do Penzic with, like most of my household and most of my friends in fencing, are not able to go this year. As I want to do my first Penzic with like all my friends and found family in the SCA. So he's like, yeah, I'll do Lilies this year, and it'll be that also gives me extra time to prepare for
Yes.
it, because I've never done anything like that. Um, so it's gonna be an awesome time no matter what. It's like I should probably figure out doing a war in general first.
Yeah. Yeah. Penzic was my first event.
I remember you mentioned that at the Tournament of Arts. Is like
Yeah, everything after
that's a
that,
doozy.
yeah, just sucked. So I finally, 30 years in the SCA, I can accept other events now.
Hmm.
For me, that Penzic was like magical and crazy and awesome and
Hmm.
everything
As
else.
my not my first event, but my first camping event was SCA 50 year. Uh,
Wow.
mhm.
So let's dive off of that. I'm opening the wrong screen. So let's dive off of that and talk about where is the Shire of Minid Sarin?
It's the so we're centered in the Bloomington, Indiana area. Uh, Actual area wise, I'm honestly still working on a map like for to put on the website for it, because we encompass 44 zip codes. Um, there have been a number of like groups kind of adjacent that just interest dwindled over the years and uh, came into our area technically. Um, so I don't know if we're like the biggest shire in Middle Kingdom, but I think we're close.
Mhm.
We are the oldest shire in the Middle Kingdom. I do know that.
Um, sorry. I'm sorry, everybody. Zoph gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning. This is bedtime. I'm pumpkining. So I wanted to ask you, so you're web minister and the exchequer for that group.
Hmm.
What drew you into being an officer?
Um, so into being an officer in general, like when I joined, which was just like a little just a little over a year ago, joining this group. Um, there was still I was happy to just be getting back involved with things, but it was definitely not as closely knit of a group as it had been like during my time in Rivenstar. And that's partially because one, SCA is still recovering from COVID,
Mhm.
and two, there's just Purdue is much more friendly, I guess, with their local SCA group in terms of like being able to like get involved in doing like student stuff and like being able to use like places on campus. When I was like um they're more limited in like the kinds of activities that could be done, like the kinds of uh get most of like all the people aside from like the people that ran Rivenstar. My first friends in Rivenstar were like other students that also got came in through like the club fair. Um, and so wanted to basically the Shire was still recovering, and there wasn't there was a kind of degree of burnout from a lot of the members that have been doing this for a long time. Um, and just like not as a means of like is like we gotta change the ways, but more is like I still have the energy to do this. How can I is like how can the people that still have some sparkle of wonder in their eyes
Yeah,
um
yeah.
actually what can we um uh so yeah, we've been like trying to further some of our like ANS stuff and whatnot, and we got a couple of members of all places accidentally through Reddit. like I was asking, we were looking for a new location for our fencing practice, and I asked on like the Bloomington subreddit if anyone knew of any locations, and I had like two or three people message me. It was like, what is this medieval fencing club you're talking about? It's like, okay. And yeah, like at least two of them are like super active members with
That's
us now.
awesome. Yay, Reddit.
Yeah. um so uh see, like I was, even before I took up any officer stuff, was just wanting to get involved, you know, keep it, make like I rediscovered my love for the SCA that had dwindled in those years that I had to take off. And I was like, I want this group is still recovering from COVID. I want to help it because like this and like today now, it's like this is my main hobby. Most of my friends in the area I know through or met through the SCA. Um, I mean, it's so yeah, I very much have a tendency to hyper focus, and when the hyper focus is not even like a specific project, but just SCA in general, is like, all right, is like, okay, what can I do that's crazy?
Yeah.
Um, the specific officer stuff I do, it just came up that like Webminister was open, and like our website had been pretty bare bones. Like just past couple people just because it's hosted on WordPress, and it's not the most intuitive, but it's not the easiest website builder to use. Even if you know how it works, it's just hard to make it do what you want it to.
Yeah.
So it'd been like it'd been kept very simple at that point. And I'd done some web design like for, you know, making my like early stages of what my, you know, portfolio site was. But in high school, did a web design class, and like continued some of that in college and whatnot. So I at least had a basic understanding of that. And
Oh.
also communication, like the main two ways any group should be communicating information is there's a Facebook page, but for those that don't use Facebook, the website. And we just uh it wasn't being kept up to date on the goings on and whatnot. um and so when they were saying, you know, does anyone wants to take this up, it's like, I how with any project I took up, how hard could it be? A little bit hard, but
It's not super easy. I mean, that's
yeah.
what I do for a living is websites. So, yeah.
um but no, but I ended up, yeah, got the Shire site rebuilt, got a fair amount of we got like, you know, newcomer info and whatnot on there. So like we've actually got a place to send, you know, people's like, here's the basics defined. We recently, one of our other officers took up the chronicler position, so we have a newsletter again. So I've integrated that into the site. So now you've also got the, you know, place where the newsletter is. I'm working on resource pages, so basically all the relevant links that you need. So, you know, like basically the official SCA website, and, you know, membership information, all that. The Midrealm website, and where you find award recommendations, and the order precedence and all that. All the stuff that I didn't know existed until someone told me about it when I was in the SCA. Is like, okay, that's what we need on these links pages. Like, so much stuff does kind of is just like trickle down knowledge, and it's good to at least uh it should have basically a quick reference for, like, hey, here's some stuff that's not obvious but is very important to know about.
Right, right. Well, so we're almost out of time.
Hmm.
So let's go ahead with the last question.
Okay.
What can the SCA do better?
There are, because I'm just thinking about this since before we went live, and the two the two main things that stick with me are uh how how not necessarily we get new members, but how we keep new members, and just the general feeling of its of like the feeling of an event, I guess. So for the first part, there's, and this is one of the reasons I like been like the two big things I made past the essentials for the website is newcomer information and like these uh references to the relevant information that's not on that newcomer page. Is like SCA has been around for a long time. There's a lot of information, and it's so overwhelming that even when you are, even with you've got super supportive people when you're interested, it's just so hard to find your footing. Like there's definitely a learning curve into like being like there's when you first find out about there's casual interest, and then there's becoming an actual member of the society. And a lot of people kind of generally fall off of that because it's either was because like I had friends that ended up just not continuing with it, and for some it just like didn't turn out to be their thing, but for others it was too, they wanted to keep doing it, but they couldn't figure out how, in terms of like they didn't know what was available to them, um or couldn't find what especially with stuff, uh any type of resources available in like, for gold key is the big example. Like that's the big one that's around. But many groups have loaner gear for their fighters and whatnot as they're just getting into it. But having a the best, I guess, best way to put it is like informational gold key. uh and I know there's a couple people I know that are working on something kind of like that, of like like basically putting together databases of, like these are people, like these are what these, basically like list of and like ANS experts, like their areas of expertise, and same for fighting and whatnot. Of it's a big game of telephone, um and a thing that'd be really good in both people finding their niches, um in that newcomer aspect of it, and also just you know prospering the society in general with share with you know uh making that knowledge shared, is having it be in uh recorded places like that, rather than so much of it being word of mouth.
Right, right.
I'm trying now, as I'm finishing this, I can't remember what the second point I had was.
Welcome to my brain. That's
Yeah,
why I write everything down, because otherwise I don't remember anything.
this what was the other one? Oh, I it was the um this is a thought. It's not an original thought of mine. This is what, like about a year ago, not a year ago, but it's a couple months ago. There was the article circulating around about like why the SCA has a recruitment problem.
Mhm.
And one thing that stood out to me that I just like I'd never thought about that, but is that it doesn't. I always say like we are, it's not a reenactment, it's a recreation society, because it's not recreating historical events. It's, as if this stuff was happening today. But there's especially on the martial side of it, it definitely at times, is it feels more of a medieval veneer over, a otherwise fairly like modern activity. Um, that's not to say it's like it's not to say, there you're not people aren't doing, historical stuff. Like my rapier, I study, historical Italian and Spanish style for that, but it doesn't, and it's so hard to put into words like the how you actually address it too, because you're not it's like I don't want it to be like, fully, full immersion, fully in character for persona thing, but there's somewhere of a balance between, that level of like basically full scale, or full larping,
Right.
and and doing things with, in the garb, in the doing the crafts, but with no pretense that it's actually medieval. It's more so just the appearance, I guess. And it's not, it's not necessarily bad the way that it is now, but it definitely, I'm all there for, that level of immersion and like the kind of the pomp and circumstance of like one of my special interests right now is researching historical like ceremonies. I've been cold not calling but cold emailing the guilds of London to try to find information on like historical guild practices because it's not published anywhere. um um and so like that, uh I don't know, and I don't know how it would work better, because there's any way that you slice that is going to have uh, a trade-off one way or another, and people who want things to change, people who want to keep it like just the ways it's been going, such is the way of anything else in the world. um, but like that particular point really stood out to me in that article, is that there's not a ton of effort to make it feel like it's actually from the time we're emulating.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. No, I agree with you. All right. So, before we go, because we are totally out of time, it is
Oh yeah.
bedtime for Mama Z. I want you to I put links to your Facebook page, your Instagram page, and
Mm,
your website. But
mm,
for those who are going to watch this on YouTube later, can you
mm.
spell out your website or say
Yes.
it and then spell it out so they can find it?
All right. So my website, it's where I post all of my SCA projects, is angistarts.com, and that is ANGIST dash ARTS.com.
Okay.
Um, on Facebook, where most of my projects are posted, and this is also where I post my mundane projects where I like my prop making and builds or holy fantasy stuff that I do. Um, is Adamantus Artifacts, and that is ADAMANTUS ARTIFACTS. And I realized after I made my website that I really went overboard on the A alliterations. uh,
Ah, nice. All right, we are
yeah.
out of time. Totally out of time. So
Mm,
thank you so much for joining me tonight. This has been a
thank you very
really
much for
fascinating
having me.
conversation. Again, I've been talking with Parzival Angist. Did I say it right?
Angist.
Angist. Dang nabbit.
It's
You have been,
German.
oh, dang Germans.
Mm.
You have been watching Simply, I love Germans. I'm part German. You have been watching Simply Scadian, no title required. We will be back in 2 weeks with our season 4 ending show, which will be a panel of 2 to 3 second or third generation Scadians to talk about their adventures in the SCA. We'll see you then. Thank you. Have a great night.